Harry's wife, a torrent of gloop. Yes, that is what you can expect from Harry's wife, a torrent of gloop. But where is this latest torrent of gloop coming from vis-a-vis Harry's wife? Well, according to the Telegraph and a review by Ed Power, it is this: Live to Lead review. A torrent of motivational gloop from Harry and Harry's wife. Ah, yes. The next Netflix offering, where Harry and Harry's wife's production company just purchased a pre-existing set of interviews and then have stuck themselves at the front with no doubt some fridge magnet platitudes by way of introduction and make it seem like the whole thing was their shebang. This is another attempt to stamp their facade onto the world and is in tandem with Harry's wife's deluded view that she is a kind and decent person, and also engaging in character trait acquisition by equating herself as peers of the people who are interviewed. Ed Power writes, the Sussex's role in this series is both peripheral and odd, while interviewees from Greta Thunberg to Jacinda Ardern are fitfully engaging. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are off to a blockbuster start to their new careers as Netflix content creators. Took them fucking long enough, though. Harry and Harry's Wife, the sprawling, intermittently gossipy series chronicling their decoupling from the royal family, has, in just a few weeks, become the most watched documentary in the streamer's history. Now, of course, that would provide Harry's wife with fuel, and she would not, of course, realise that many people have watched it simply out of distaste and wanting to see what the car crash is up to now. Of course, there are people who've watched it because they're supporters of Harry and Harry's wife, but a lot of people started watching it, many of whom did not finish it, which includes me, because I have much better things to do with my time than wade through that bollocks, because we wanted to see what was going on. And of course I did so from a more professional perspective in terms of analysing the material and then going through that by way of video. But quite frankly, I have other things I'd much rather talk about than continue to wade through that nonsense. Nevertheless, the fact that it was the most watched documentary will be a feather in the cap of Harry's wife, and she won't see through the real reason why. You see, it's interesting, of course, when it comes to narcissists, when there is infamy or notoriety. Take Andrew Tate, for example, who I'll be speaking about in greater detail in the next couple of days. He revels in the fact of the coverage of his arrest. Why? Because he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't operate with a facade. His approach is what you see is what you get. So what? I'm the king of toxic masculinity? Good. Now suck my dick. That's his approach. If you criticise him for his toxic masculinity, he just shrugs, probably lights another cigar and polishes one of his expensive motor vehicles. He relishes in people getting their panties in a bunch about what he does. The more you criticise him, the more he feeds off it. It's the provocative nature of his style of narcissism. However, Harry's wife can't understand why people would criticise her. She, of course, feeds off it, but she deals with it in a more hurt, or at least pseudo-hurt fashion. Why are they criticising me? With Tate, so they're criticising me, they know fuck all. They're weaklings. They don't get it. Fuck 'em. That's his approach, and he asserts control over those individuals by basically jettisoning them, thinking that they're idiots, that they're weak, that they're crybabies, and as a consequence of that, he doesn't need to give them any more thought. With Harry's wife, she deals with it more by complaining, because she operates a facade whereby she thinks she's a kind and decent person. And her narcissism causes her to think, why have they got it in for me? I'm so lovely. Why do they keep saying that I'm awful and I'm a liar and a hypocrite? I don't understand. So for her, each and every time that there's criticism of her, it's more challenging to her than it is to the likes of Tate because of the operation of the facade. But her narcissism then does deal with it, either indirectly or by a position of withdrawal to get the control that she requires. Furthermore, with Harry's wife, her level of delusion is such that she would believe that all those watching the documentary like her. See, Harry, CH, look, look at all of these people watching our series. We are loved. She wouldn't dig deeper to realise, many of these are grudge watches or hate watches. No, she will, through her deluded mind, just think, look, millions have watched it. We are loved and supported. Huzzah. The article continues. In just a few weeks, Harry and Harry's Wife has become the most watched documentary in the streamer's history. But now comes the tricky second album, and those drawn to the soap opera element of the Sussex's story will be underwhelmed by Live to Lead. If ever there were a televisual equivalent of eating your greens, this is it. 7 half-hour episodes explore the life experiences of inspirational figures from across the generations. The sort of people whose words end up on fridge magnets and aphoristic Facebook memes. They include, for instance, the late US Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Gen Z environmental activist Greta Thunberg. The latter might have a few choice words to offer on the Sussex's recently reported fondness for private jets, hypocrisy, but we'll never know. She and they don't actually meet. Instead, the Duke and Duchess pop up at the start of each episode to introduce the subject, and Harry's wife delivers self-actualised tongue twisters, actually, word salad. For instance, the legacy that New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is building extends from her belief in never losing her capacity for empathy, while Harry quotes Nelson Mandela, by whose foundation Live to Lead is co-produced. They then retreat, and New Zealand documentarian Jeff Blackwell gets on with the tedious business of conducting the actual interviews. It isn't that the Sussexes were too busy to step behind the cameras and ask feminist campaigner Gloria Steinem, her again, whether she had a message for her 20-year-old self, a tedious question that Blackwell springs upon a number of the interviewees. Several of these recordings predate their deal with Netflix. The Bader Ginsburg conversation, for instance, was taped in 2019, 12 months before her death from cancer, and long before Harry and Harry's wife, through their Archwell production company, entered into a $100 million collaboration with the streaming platform. Bader Ginsburg reveals that her husband was her biggest supporter. He was the first boy I ever knew who cared that I had a brain. This, you suspect, is the sort of message the Sussexes can get behind, which my observation is quite hilarious, because those two are a pair of pea-brains. The Jacinda Ardern sit-down, likewise, dates from 3 years ago, and it came as news to New Zealand's Premier that she was to feature in a Harry and Harry's Wife documentary. See Parts Passing, where she distanced herself from it. She had originally agreed to be interviewed by the Nelson Mandela Foundation as a part of an initiative producing resources for future leaders, with the focus on young leaders. The first she knew of her being sucked into the gravitational field of planet Sussex was when Netflix released a trailer for Live to Lead earlier this month. Harry and Harry's wife's peripheral role shouldn't detract from what is an occasionally revealing collection of films. Former South African Supreme Court Judge Albie Sachs, a white man who campaigned alongside Nelson Mandela for the end of apartheid, speaks about forgiving the senior policeman who targeted him for assassination by bomb. He talks of the soft vengeance of healing and moving on, saying that, with closure, figurative roses and lilies will grow out of the army lost in the attack. Blackwell also gets a good interview out of Greta Thunberg, who opens up about her mental health struggles. Her lowest moments, she says, are when you are too depressed to see that you actually matter. But over 7 episodes, Live to Lead's stridently upbeat tone curdles into a gluttonous fake positivity. It doesn't help that the questions often seem designed to elicit trite axioms rather than to get under the skin of the interviewee. What is your hope for our generation? Where does courage come from? What does leadership mean to you? Were the series any woollier, you could stitch on some buttons and wear it as a jacket. As a brand extension, Live to Lead dovetails with the image the Sussexes are keen to present to the world. It's gushy and tastefully assembled, but with the oppressive earnestness of a morale-boosting corporate video produced by an HR department that has too much time and money. Netflix, mindful of its audience's appetite for raw scandal, must be hoping that whatever Harry and Harry's wife do next packs far greater umph and has more to do with Megxit than Mandela. Of course, this is part of character trait acquisition by bolting on this series and causing it to be representative of the values that Harry's wife believes that she holds, albeit, of course, it demonstrates quite the opposite. It demonstrates, of course, how she engages in hypocritical behaviours. Let's go below the line to see whether people agree that this is a torrent of gloop, or whether people think that it's actually something good that the Sussexes have done. Sybil Griffiths writes, how can treating your dad with such cruelty be inspirational, or causing the Queen such anxiety and pain while she was grieving for her husband and had bone cancer? Bullying attractive young women and breaking their confidence, fat-shaming 3-year-old Princess Charlotte and lying so many times, telling tales to Oprah and this ignorant, self-centered, malicious woman is considered inspirational and talks of empathy. She married a thick, nasty prince and is taking full advantage to gain sympathy, respect, and make lots of money. Tell us what you really think, Sybil. John Bull, they'd be totally ignored if they were playing Mr. and Mrs. Windsor. Jamie Yates, Harry and Harry's wife are a strange choice for this series. Neither inspire or lead. Both rely on titles given them by the royal family, an institution they both seem to despise. John Moore, the Sussexes should know they're in trouble. When Jacinda Ardern, faced with plummeting popularity at home, it turns out that people care less about empathy when their economy, livelihoods and futures are being torched on an ideological bonfire, disavows any engagement with you and your documentary. Michael Pearson, I'm no Jeremy Clarkson, but every time I see photos of Ginge and Whinge online, I have an incredible urge to put my foot through the screen. Just make it stop. Surely they are yesteryear's news by now. Nothing to offer, at least in this country. Claire Louise Coleman, as soon as I read the word inspirational, I know it's time to tune out. L. James, I don't blame her. She's just a cheap money-chasing chancer, but he enabled her to insult his family and then joined in. Neither should be allowed back into this country ever again. Joe Moss, why on earth would anyone take leadership lessons from an unemployed girl with mental problems, a gold digger, and an authoritarian fascist? Peter Tonkin, she's a middle-aged woman having her last hurrah, and as others have rightly said, both she and her idiot husband get less relevant day by day. Davy Wavy Smith, always amusing to watch their fans justify the private jets, pure comedy. Eliza King, they bought a completed production and added videos of themselves to it. Pretty much sums up their abilities. Why do they have to show their face? For what? Deborah Williams, Harry's wife banging on about empathy. She doesn't know the meaning of the word, as her actions clearly show. Is there no end to the self-serving delusion of her own wonderfulness? Moira and Jalula, what a tedious pair. They must give the dullest dinner parties. Sergeant Serious replies, no one turns up. Man of Kent, they actually think they are inspirational leaders themselves. Hilarious. And on it goes. Harry's wife, of course, thinks that by bolting herself onto this, that she is an inspirational leader and that she lives to lead. This is part of her delusion and, of course, her character trait acquisition. It truly is the case that she believes that by associating herself with the people that are subject of the interviews, that she's one of them, inspirational, empathic, and a leader. She can't see that she's nowhere near it. That is the level of delusion that her narcissism generates. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.